Alright people, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification. That way you'll know when I upload the next video and you'll be supporting my channel. Follow me on Twitter. Every time I upload a new video, I'll be tweeting. Ladies and gentlemen, this is UX and this is meat really that bad? By the channel Kurzgesagt in a nutshell. Yes, this is the latest video because that just I guess uploaded. So I'm like, what the hell, no, let's do this. I always love science video, especially from Kurzgesagt. Yeah, so I don't know what he's going to talk about. Meat as in, meat is bad for you personally, or is it meat somehow bad for the environment or something? I don't know. He's been doing a lot of environment-based videos in this year, basically. So I don't know what this is. But if it's about you, I mean, I don't know. If there's an argument on all sides, but generally, no, meat is not really bad for you personally, from personal health. I mean, yeah, sure, there are some of the half-done researches there that shows that certain meats can be a problem to your oral health in long term, but that's true with any food, even some of the vegetarian foods. So I don't know. But let's wait on. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to like, subscribe, so I know which type of videos to react to more. I guess check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards for different places. Everything cards in. Yeah, that's what it.
Food is arguably the best thing about being alive. No other bodily pleasure is enjoyed multiple times every day and never gets old.
Have you tried cocaine?
It's an expression of culture, our parents' love, and a means of celebration or comfort. That's why it hits a special nerve when we're told we should change what and how we eat to fight rapid climate change. One of the most delicious foods, meat, gets the worst press. It doesn't help that the topic is really hard to properly research yourself and that debates get emotional quickly. But clearly, science can give us an answer. The reality is, well, it's complicated. Let's take a look at 3 climate arguments against meat that are used a lot and see what happens.
He's going to talk about the environment issues. Okay, environment issues. I mean, clearly it's cows, right? Meat, cows. Cows, emit lots of methane, and methane is more potent than carbon dioxide. And I guess one of his videos, I guess 2-3 videos ago, I don't know which video was that. He clearly talked about how much cows basically put out methane in the environment, which is kind of higher than I would have expected. So I don't know. It probably is going to be hard. If for the environment, it's probably going to be bad. Going to be bad. I don't know.
One, does our diet really play that big a role in climate change? Feeding billions of people is impossible without causing emissions. Even if someday we have zero-carbon tractors, refrigerators and cookers running on renewable energy, and electric trucks to move our food, there are still unavoidable emissions. Rice emits methane. We cut down forests to make room for pastures and crops. And we emit nitrous oxide when we use fertilizers and manure. Worldwide food production is responsible for about 26% of all human-made greenhouse gas emissions, which is unfortunate since food is not optional. While 26%
is not optional. As soon as he said that 26% of all the the greenhouse gas emissions is from the food, all the basically gas company and all the oil barons are like, see that it's not us, it's not the fossil fuel, it's the food. Stop eating food. You just need oil.
percent doesn't sound that bad. It means that even if we extinguished all other sources of emissions today, the emissions from food alone would still use up our entire carbon budget by 2100. So no matter how we twist and turn it, food is a real driver of climate change. Still, emissions from different food items vary a lot.
Fuck, if we just stop all the emission and just keep the food one, even then we only have a century. To me feels like, that there is probably won't be nothing done about the, basically greenhouse effect. There will be nothing done about that. I guess the level of population that is in the world and how much, I guess, we're using resources all around. The lifestyle of the modern age is not good for the earth overall. Doesn't matter what we do, right? Because if food alone, if we stop everything, live like a fucking caveman except food, even then we only have a century. That tells us that we are fucked, because at the global scale, century is nothing, right? I mean, certain millennia, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 years, I'm like, oh, look at that, yeah, food is bad. It will probably take 1,000, 2,000 years to kill it. No, it's just century.
how do things look when we compare their footprints separately? Food's climate impact is most often based on life cycle assessments, an analysis that looks at all the emissions of a product throughout its existence, from production to transportation, packaging, use, and waste management. In the most detailed meta-analysis of life cycle assessments to date, beef emissions stand out at the top. On average, a kilogram of beef emits 71 kilograms of CO2 equivalents. Lamb is
Just
also
1 kilo?
high at 40 kilograms. Pork emits 12 and poultry 10 kilograms. At the bottom we have lots of plant-based foods. Potatoes, for example, emit around 150 times less than beef.
As soon as the tofu and potato came, anybody who's just, I guess, let's just say religiously eats meat, right? All the McDonald's burgers with beef and shit. You just saw that tofu and potato like, ugh, what the fuck is that? It's a salad? What is that?
The most important aspect of food isn't weight though, it's nutrient density. A kilogram of beef would keep you alive much longer than a kilogram of potatoes. So how does the ranking change if we compare emissions per calorie or protein? Not much. Animal protein is still the most costly for the environment, and beef and lamb are also outliers in emissions per calorie.
Damn,
But is
okay.
this fair? After all, not all beef is the same. There are all sorts of ways to rear cattle, from pure grass-fed to factory farming. The worst beef comes in at 105 kilograms of emissions per 100 grams of protein, the best at only 9,
And there's the
a
bad cow, there's a
tenfold
good
difference.
cow.
In contrast, most other foods, especially plant-based, have a much narrower spectrum. Still, the best beef is worse than the worst plant. Okay, but this seems promising. Can we buy the right beef and lower our emissions? Maybe by buying locally produced beef to minimize our footprint?
Okay, how does that going to change local? Okay, first of all, I don't know. How is study done? That's what I want. Look, I'm a vegetarian, so I have no problem stopping meat, production all around the world. Don't eat meat. I wouldn't even notice that, right? I mean, I don't care. But in the end, I mean, how is this study done? How is meat produced? Obviously, it comes from a cow. It's basically cutting up a cow. So are they seeing, how cow emit emission while cow is alive? And that, includes also that in the meat production? Because that's kind of a stretch, isn't it? Because before cow becomes meat, let's just say, cow does a lot of things, like, produce dairy things. And we know cow produce a lot of meat, and there are many cows in the world, right? But are these cows solely breed for meat production, nothing else? They are fed, right? They grow up, everything until they are killed for meat, solely for the meat production. Then it's understandable, like everything comes from the cow is considered for the meat. So even the emission when cow is alive, all the cow, barfing, farting, whatever that is, all the methane in the environment is also because of this food. It's understandable. But is that how it is? Or is this just, when cow is basically used for dairy purposes and in the end killed for meat, and all that dairy purpose emission that was happening also counts as a meat thing? Is that how it is? Because if that's the case, that's not really fair. So I don't know how meat production works, how those farms work, how those cows are basically, are they solely bred for, meat purposes? I don't know that.
2. Does buying local food actually matter? Let's stick with beef, since
What does that
it's
do,
such an
Jerry?
outlier. By buying locally, you are trying to avoid emissions from transportation and packaging.
Transport.
But it turns out these only account for 0.5 to 2% of beef's total emissions. Actually, transport and packaging combined are only about 11% of all food emissions. Nearly all food transport emissions are produced over the last few miles, the regional travel on the road supplying the markets and shops in your area.
Okay.
International food transport happens mostly on freight ships, which are insanely efficient.
Yeah, because they're
For
water.
example, shipping 1 kilogram of avocados from South America to Europe generates about 0.3 kilograms of CO2 equivalents in transport emissions and around 2.5 kilograms overall, while 1 kilogram of beef from your local butcher will come in at 18 kilograms in CO2 equivalents at least. So even when shipped great distances, emissions from almost all plant-based foods cause lower emissions than locally produced animal products. Okay, so if transport doesn't play a big role, what causes the vast amounts of emissions from beef then? By far the largest share of beef emissions consists of methane released directly by the animals.
Yeah.
While CO2 hangs around for centuries, methane only stays in the atmosphere for decades.
That is more potent.
But in these short periods, it is very powerful. All in all, methane has already caused 23 to 40% of human-made warming so far. There's controversy about how bad this is exactly, and we don't want to dive in too deep here, but the way things stand, any kinds of extra emissions are not great. Still, all cows burp and fart to similar degrees. What explains the spectrum of beef emissions? There are a couple of things. It makes a difference if the beef comes from a dairy herd or one dedicated to beef production. 44% of the world's beef comes from dairy cows, sharing its footprint with dairy products.
See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I was saying. That 44% of them are mixed. Like, they use, efficiently they use for dairy things, and then they're killed for food, right? So I guess it's not fair to put all of that onto the meat thing, right? Like, this is all this emission is for the meat, because dairy also got produced from that, right? So they would have used cow and all the emission for the dairy anyway, even if they didn't, try to eat meat or whatever. So yeah, so I think the chart we saw about methane coming from the cows was that high, that meat is causing that much of emission. I think that's a bit exaggerated. I mean, I hope that's a bit exaggerated. Otherwise, that's just terrifying. Just eating meat causes that much fucking emission. That's just ridiculous.
Cows tend to get higher quality feed, which makes them grow faster and emit less methane. Geography also plays a role because it determines which farming methods are possible. The worst factor by far is the destruction of forests for farmland. Not only does this release the CO2 that was bound in the flora, it sets free carbon that was stored in the soil and destroys its ability to store it in the future. This aspect accounts for much of the range of emissions in beef. The worst emitters are farms burning down rainforest for farmland, especially in Brazil. There is a sinister truth hidden here. The more animals suffer, the better they are in terms of climate change because they are way more efficient. They use less land and their food is brought right to them, and so they grow faster and don't expend energy on things like walking. Cattle in a factory farm that never get to roam pastures can sometimes be less destructive for the climate than cattle grazing peacefully on a formerly lush piece of rainforest. But isn't it a bit out of touch with reality to demonize cows so much? Some of the land these animals are grazing on isn't suitable for crops anyway. By grazing on pastures, they can turn things we can't digest into food. Isn't farming animals just a smart way to make the best use of unused resources? 3. Don't cows mainly use land that we can't use for agriculture or other things?
Could that title be any longer? Yeah. I mean, I don't know, was it CGP Grey or was it Kurzgesagt that showed me, or was it Real Life Raw? Show me the scale of how much farmland for cows there is. It's like equivalent to some continent or something. That much how just the farmland for cows that has been used. I don't know if that's just for meat or meat, dairy combined, but still that's a lot of it. So yeah, I mean that makes sense, right? Not everything is perfect for agriculture. So some of the land that is just unused, I mean, could have been used for cows. But as far as I remember, right, that in this sector, in this type of a business, let's just say about meat production, companies and basically farms basically look for efficiencies, right? So they won't just think like, okay, that land is basically unused, so cows can roam around and I guess grow. No, they will basically create some kind of a system, feed things to cows that makes them bigger, have more meat to them, right? Overall, just better. They won't be just like, naturally grass-fed, they're just walking on land, that type of thing. So every farm that there is, probably majority of them are specifically, I guess, tailored for that business. They are fed specific things. They are put in a specific places, not just roaming on the land or something like that. I don't know. I'm pretty sure in business sense, they are not just going to let them roam around the free land, eat whatever they want with little meat that probably won't profit that much. They are not going to do that.
About half of the world's ice and desert-free land is used for agriculture, an area the size of the entire Americas plus China.
Damn.
Half of all agriculturally used land is dedicated to animals. Most of it is grassland, 65% of which cannot be converted to cropland. So pasturing animals is actually a very efficient way to use those areas since we can't grow human food there anyway.
Okay.
There are a couple of catches here though. While the idea of cows turning useless grass into steak is nice, it is part of a marketing lie. Even though it is so massive, pastureland alone can't support the ruminants living on it.
There you go.
Globally, grazing systems sustain only 13% of beef production. So if we were to switch to 100% grass-fed, we'd simply have to eat much less beef. In the US, beef production would crash by some 70% if it were to exclusively rely on grass. The only way to sustain our high demand for meat is by growing crops and feeding them to our cattle.
There you go. See, I knew
And
it.
we haven't even
I knew it. I know how businesses work. I know how corporate world is, right? I mean, this is a more efficient way of, I guess, using the land that is not used for agriculture. Sure. But the person who's running that wants to make money. He's not going to do that, right? He's going to feed them a more, I guess, specified diet to this cow, so they, grow even bigger and bigger. So there is more, I guess, profit in the end. So that's fucked up. So let me get this straight. All this, rice and all this basically food, if you grow them, that creates, greenhouse emissions, right? Then you take that food, feed it to cows, and then they grow, create more emissions, and then you have meat. That's it.
even talked about chicken and pigs, which exclusively eat feed crops. Because of this feed demand, less than half of the world's cereals are used directly as human food.
Only half?
41% is fed to animals. The same is true for soy. There's a lot of talk about Amazon deforestation for soy production, which makes us think of soy milk and tofu. But only 19% of global soy production goes towards products for humans. About 77% is used to feed animals. Besides, land without food crops isn't automatically ecologically useless. A beef-free diet would free up around 2 billion hectares. A vegan diet would free up around 3 billion hectares of land. We could use this land to grow forests or restore...
Wait a minute, if vegan means laying off dairy, then he just talked about removing cows as a whole as a cattle. First of all, I don't know, how is vegan diet good, right? I mean, if you don't eat meat or anything like that, and you're just vegan, so you're not even eating anything dairy, right? You're not taking certain type of proteins and essential, nutrition. I mean, you can get that, sure, from certain vegetables here and there, certain crops. But, your diet has to be really perfect and big enough to do that. Overall, I mean, let's just say, certain health experts of the world, right? They are like, I only eat vegan, like boiled vegetables, nothing else. Most of them never went past 50 or 60 years of age because of this. I mean, you can't just eat plant, right? You need something. If you're not going to eat meat or something like that, you need dairy or something like that.
Wild grasslands, basically anything that could suck carbon out of the atmosphere. If we spared 3 billion hectares of land, it could remove about 800 billion tons of CO2 from the air over 100 years. By comparison, we emit about 50 billion tons of CO2 equivalents per year at the moment. Okay, to summarize, food is a huge driver of emissions. Meat, but especially beef, is the worst food in terms of emissions.
There you go.
Buying locally does not have a big impact on food emissions compared to the type of food you're consuming. When it comes to beef, cattle that are grass-fed can sometimes even be counterproductive because they just need much more land. Even if you find the most environmentally friendly beef in the world, your burger still comes with a significantly higher carbon footprint than a veggie patty. You can decide for yourself what you want to do with this information.
Ah, come on. Nobody's eating meat burgers are gonna eat veggie patty, come on. Fox News, breaking news from Tucker Carlson. Is Kurzgesagt the communist coming after your meat, your cow and your burger, everything that is America? That's the breaking news, that's the title is going to be.
In fact, you are always only one decision away from making a change. You could start learning a new skill or dive into a new interest today. It's up to you. If only that first step wasn't so hard to take. We have something for you to make it a little easier. We are big fans of Skillshare, an online learning community that offers thousands of classes for all skill levels in tons of creative disciplines.
Look, after reacting things for last year, right? Obviously, I was already that guy who puts scientific knowledge and education on the top. But still, even after reacting lots of historical stuff, scientific stuff, and general stuff, basically. This is not just some math. Seriously, I mean, if there is one place you should spend your money, I mean, people buy countless games and crap that they don't even play. I have certain games that I bought and never even played, $60 AAA games. I still haven't played because I don't have time. So I mean, you can buy something like Skillshare, right? I mean, there is a real knowledge there, and it's not like some books that you just walk your ass to a school and you just have to read books. This is the way of learning that will be, I guess, tailored specific to people, right? I mean, sites like Skillshare nowadays uses that kind of thing, right? I mean, they analyze how to capture people's attention and what type of setup to use that people will be, I guess, more interested in certain topics. So it's really easier to understand things if you go to sites like that. So nowadays, in past few years, sites like Skillshare, there is very high demand for that. It's just, I guess, at the global scale, it's just broken out like that. Many sites like that. So yeah, if you should spend money, why not on education? If it's going to be entertaining at least. So yeah, but seriously, go to original video page link and support Kurzgesagt too by clicking on Skillshare.com. Yeah, you'll be learning things. All right, that was is meat really that bad for environment? That should have been the title. I mean, yeah, kind of, right? I mean, if you're gonna grow crops and then fed it to cows, then cow is gonna emit more emissions, and then you're gonna eat meat. Yeah, let's just say meat is when it comes to a sense of food, meat is not that. It's more like a luxury food. But yeah, I mean, you can get you don't need lots of things. Let's just say people are still going with that, and that is causing even more emissions. There are many things that you can do right now, right? Governments at the global scale can do right now. That right now will cost a lot, right? In first 3-4 years, it's going to cost a lot, but overall, from there on, in 10 years, 20 years span, if you look at it, it will cost much less than what we are paying now to the oils and gases, right? So it's cost effective. When it comes to governments, you think about longer time spans, like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years when it comes to country, right? So just seeing by that kind of charts, like in 10 years, we are going to spend much less if we employ this kind of new technologies to, create energy and shit. But people are still not doing that, right? Because let's just say most of the corporate companies are in the pockets of politicians, and just argument that in first 3 years, you're going to be using more money is enough for them to just argue that we can't do this. We don't have money right now. So if we can't even do that, no way in hell people are giving up on meat. So all this information is look at what we can do right now, but it's just wishy-washy. It's not going to happen. So yeah. Alright, if you like my reaction on the phone, like, subscribe, check out the reaction. There's a link in the description. Check out the cards. Yeah, I'll see you next time.